Good morning, fifth grade. I'm so bummed I'm not here with you today, but I know you're going to do your very best work. And I'm really hoping that you will get this assignment completely finished today and have some extra time to work on some extra credit. So there's going to be a packet of explorers that you can go ahead and look at, kind of to reiterate some of the stuff that we looked at for chapter 2, which was explorers. So when you finish this assignment today, if you have time in class, I want you to start reading in that explorers packet. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with chapter 3, A Changing Continent. Let's go ahead and make this bigger for us. Page it down to 1, and we should be able to zoom in. Awesome. Okay, so by looking at this, you can clearly see that chapter 3 is titled A Changing Continent. All right, so what is the impact of people settling in a new place? That's going to be our essential question. So let's think about that. What is the impact of people settling in a new place? So if you were to move and settle in a new place, what kind of impact would you have on that place, and what kind of impact would that place have on you? That's kind of what we're going to talk about here. So it says, in this chapter, you'll read about how European settlements developed across the east coast of North America. You'll learn how those settlements affected the lives of Native Americans who lived in those areas. So we're going to see how the Europeans that land there, kind of similarly to the Europeans that explored this area, affected the Native Americans. Now we're going to see, now we have people that are going to actually move in and live here. How is that going to affect the land and the Native Americans that are already here? All right, so just as a quick overview, let's go ahead and take a look at what our lessons are going to look like. So we can clearly see there are 5 lessons in chapter 3. Lesson 1 is going to be the Jamestown Colony. Lesson 2 is cooperation and conflict in North America. That word cooperation, what does that mean? It means to be able to work together, okay? So conflict is kind of like fighting, cooperation is working together. So what kind of working together and what kinds of fighting are we going to have in North America? Then we have lesson 3, which we're going to talk about the New England colonies. Lesson 4, we're going to talk about the middle colonies. And then lesson 5, we're going to talk about the southern colonies, right? And then we'll look at the impact today, which is the culture in the Western Hemisphere. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our opening map here. So this says European influence in the Americas. So we're going to see what these different colors mean. So if we look at the red, which is just very, very little, all the way here on the East Coast, okay, that is the European or the English settlements. So English settlements. Then we look at the pink, and that's the English influence. So if it's striped with green, that means there's green and pink. So that means there would be the French influence as well as the English influence here. Okay, so French settlements would be in the dark green. So that's where people are actually settling at and living. And then the influence is just, hey, they've explored it and maybe they say, hey, I've claimed this land. Okay, and then as far as Spanish settlements and Spanish influence, we have the brighter yellow would be the influence, and then the orangish color is going to be the settlements for the Spanish. So we have English, French, and Spanish for those European influences in the Americas, and this is about the 1700s. So by looking at this question and looking at this map, I want you to answer, what area did Spain control by 1700? You can see here. Okay, so let me go ahead and cut this. This is North America, right? So up here would be Canada. In the middle area here, we have the United States. And then down in here, we have Mexico. Okay, so which area did Spain control by the 1700s? Right, and then which nation would have controlled most of the shipping trade out of important ports on the east coast of North America? So I was looking at the east coast of North America, and this is where we would ship and trade from, because obviously the boats are going to come sailing in and they're going to land right here on the coast. So which European country had pretty much the whole monopoly on that. Would it have been the English settlement, or the English, the French, or the Spanish? So look at the colors here and who owns or settled this land. The English, the French, or the Spanish. So let's go ahead and continue on with the reading. So it says between 16 and 1700, three major powers fought for control of a territory in North America. England, Spain, and France created settlements across the East Coast. Most coastal territory ultimately belonged to England, but Spain kept control of the area that is now Florida. France gained control of much of the interior areas of what is now the United States and Canada. So by interior, they mean the inside. Okay, so this would be the exterior around the outsides of the continent, and the interior, you can see that French had a very large hold on an influence on this land here. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the timeline then for this chapter. It'll give a kind of a little bit of insight into what we're going to see. So I've got 1634, we have Lord Baltimore founds Maryland. In 1636 and 1637, we have the Pequot War. In 1675-76, we have King Philip's War. In 1682, we have Peter the Great becomes ruler of Russia, resulting in more European culture. In 1688, we have Glorious Revolution in England results in a stronger parliament and a constitutional monarchy. In 1692, we have the Salem witch trials that begin. 1712, Carolina colony splits into North and South. So we have North Carolina and South Carolina. And then we have Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne de Bienville found New Orleans. Okay, we're going to continue on with this Connect Through Literature. And this is The Whistle by Benjamin Franklin. We'll read a lot more about Benjamin Franklin. When I was a child of 7 years old, my friends on a holiday filled my pocket with coppers. When he talks about coppers, that would be pennies. I went directly to a shop where they sold toys for children, and being charmed with the sound of a whistle that I met by the way of in the hands of another boy, I voluntarily offered and gave all of my money for one. I then came home and went whistling all over the house, much pleased with my whistle, but disturbing all the family. My brothers and sisters and cousins, understanding the bargain I had made, told me I had given 4 times as much for it as it was worth. Put me in mind what good things I might have bought with the rest of my money, and laughed at me so much for my folly that I cried with vexation, and the reflection gave me more jargon than the whistle gave me pleasure. So his family, after he ran with this boy and he found this whistle and he gave all of his money for it, he said, "Here, take it all. I really want that whistle." And his family was giving him a hard time and saying, "You paid 4 times more than you should have paid for that whistle." And it really made him upset. This, however, was afterwards of use to me, the impression continuing on my mind, so that often when I was tempted to buy some unnecessary thing, I say to myself, "Don't give too much for the whistle," and I saved my money. So this is him thinking, hey, I remember I paid too much for that. So now every time he really, really wants something, he stops and he thinks. He says, do I really want that? Do I really need that? Is it really going to make me happy? Is it going to be worth my time or my money? Continuing on, as I grew up, came into the world, and observed the actions of men, I thought I met with many, very many, who gave too much for the whistle. When I saw one too ambitious of court favor, sacrificing his time and attendance on levees, his repose, his liberty, his virtue, and perhaps his friends to attain it, I have said to myself, this man gives too much for his whistle. So he's saying that this man here, he wants to be high up in power, and he wants to have a lot of power in government. And he's saying, but with that happening, he is giving up on his friends, his virtue, his happiness, more or less, just to attain this this court favor or this higher up in government. A quick illustration of him and his whistle and annoying everybody in the house. When I saw another fond of popularity, constantly employing himself in political bustles, neglecting his own affairs, and ruining them by that neglect, he pays indeed, said I, too much for his whistle. If I knew a miser who gave up every kind of comfortable living, all the pleasures of doing good to others, all the esteem of his fellow citizens, and the joys of benevolent friendship, for the sake of accumulating wealth, poor man, said I, you pay too much for your whistle. So this is another example here where he says, if he knew somebody who would give up everything just for wealth, just for money, he would have to give up his doing good to others, his comfortable living, the esteem of his fellow citizens, the joys of his friendship, just to be wealthy, then he's not going to be wealthy. He's going to be a poor man, and he's going to pay too much for his whistle. When I met with a man of pleasure, sacrificing every laudable improvement of the mind or his fortune to mere corporal sensations, and ruining his health in their pursuit, mistaken man, said I, you are providing pain for yourself instead of pleasure. You give too much for your whistle. If I see one fond appearance, or fine clothes, fine houses, fine furniture, fine equipages, all above his fortune, for which he contracts debts and ends his career in a prison, alas, say I, he has paid dear, very dear, for his whistle. And this is a picture drawing of Benjamin Franklin here. When I see a beautiful, sweet-tempered girl married to an ill-natured brute of a husband, what a pity, say I, that she pays so much for a whistle. In short, I conceive that great part of the miseries of mankind are brought upon them by the false estimates they have made of the value of things, and by their giving too much for their whistles. Yet I ought to have charity for these unhappy people when I consider that, with all this wisdom of which I am boasting, there are certain things in the world so tempting, for example, the apples of King John, which happily are not to be bought. For if they were put to sale by auction, I might very easily be led to ruin myself in the purchase, and find that I once more have given too much for the whistle. So all in all, what Benjamin Franklin is really talking about is think of the things that are important to you. And if you're sacrificing those things for other things that really aren't important, then you're giving too much for your whistle. So I want you to explain that in your own words. So what does Ben Franklin mean when he says that someone pays too much for a whistle? I want you to think about that, and then I want you to type that in your own words. What do you think Ben Franklin means when he says that someone pays too much for a whistle? All right, and then I want you to look at number 3. I'm not going to have you answer this, but I do want you to think about it. So what are some situations today that you can think cause people to give too much for their whistle? So think of times that maybe you or somebody in your family spends a lot of time on something or money on something that doesn't really truly make them happy, or it doesn't really lead to their happiness or their success. So just think about that. Okay, so just like we did in last chapter, we have some people you should know. So let's go and take a look at the first one here. All right, and that is Oluda Equiano, and he was kidnapped from his home in Nigeria at the age of 11 in 1756. Oluda Equiano was sold into slavery. He was eventually purchased by a sea captain, and he sailed the world before purchasing his own freedom. After he settled in England, he wrote the story of his life, the interesting narrative of the life of Oluda Equiano. The book helped to persuade many people of the evils of the slave trade. So he was one to speak out about slavery, and he published a book about it. Then we have Anne Hutchinson, the well-educated daughter of an Anglican church leader in London. Anne Hutchinson was vocal about her religious beliefs, meaning that she spoke out about her religious beliefs. After emigrating to Boston at the age of 43, she spoke out against the Puritans' strict rules about how people should worship. Many people in the Massachusetts Bay Colony agreed with her and attended the discussions that she hosted. Governor John Winthrop disagreed with her, however, and she was ultimately banished from the colony. She started her own settlement in what is now Rhode Island in 1638. Continuing on, I have John Winthrop. So, John Winthrop. As a governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony for parts of the 1630s and 1640s, John Winthrop believed the new Puritan settlement should be a city on a hill, a model of perfect morals and social behavior. He wanted everyone to sign a covenant or a sacred agreement with the Puritan faith. He also worked to make sure that anyone who disagreed with his strict rules was removed from the colony. And then we have Benjamin Franklin. Most people know about Benjamin Franklin as one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence and as a scientist and ambassador. But his career began at the age of 16 in 1722 when he started writing essays in his brother's newspaper. He convinced his brother and the readers of the paper that his essays were written by a middle-aged woman named Silence Dogood. Later, Franklin earned the fame and fortune as a newspaper printer in his own right. So at 16 years old, he was publishing essays that people thought were by a middle-aged woman, which, look at that name, that's like a pen name, Silence Dogood. Okay, so that is all we have for today. Whenever you finish, you can work on your articles that I talked about at the beginning, reading on those articles about different explorers that we talked about, some that we talked about in the last chapter. All right, you guys have a great rest of your Monday, and I will see you all soon.